Approval of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act in the United States House of Representatives. The U.S. House of Representatives held a referendum on the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act at noon on September 22, and the result was 406 voters to 3, with 22 abstentions. Once the law is approved by the United States Senate, it will be presented to the President Trump to sign it so it becomes a formal law. The Chinese goods will be confiscated if there was no enough evidence to prove that the products were not made by forced labor. Earlier, the Human Rights Policy Act became the first law enacted by the US government regarding the Uyghurs, with an absolute majority of voters approved by the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. Soon it was signed by the President Donald Trump. This is the second law that the US government officially passes for the Uyghurs. The Uzbek government published a photo of the first president of the East Turkistan Republic. In Tashkent, the Uzbek government recently published a picture of İlhan Toure, the first president of East Turkistan Republic between 1944 and 1949, on a billboard, drawing the attention of the Turkistani people, especially the exiled ones. At a time where the Chinese government is committing a genocide against humanity in East Turkestan, the Turkish and Muslim countries were supposed to stand by the persecuted people of East Turkestan who are facing waves of violence and repression. At the very least, they should have openly hated China or took some action like the US-led democratic countries. But most of them chose to remain silent about China's crimes in exchange for money and Chinese influence, which caused more harm to the Uyghur people. However, some Turkish countries such as Turkey and Uzbekistan in Central Asia still encourage and support the Uyghur people. China is demolishing mosques and wiping out their history. An article was published in the New York Times that reports on the Chinese occupation demolishing mosques and cemeteries and destroying the ancient monuments in East Turkestan. The atrocities committed by China has been relieved once again. Lately, China demolished thousands of historical places, including the cemetery of Ordom and Imam Asim, as part of their wide historical genocide campaign waged by China. Although the Chinese authorities mocked the Australian Institute for Policy and Strategy report describing it as a complete lie, China is embarrassing itself in the eyes of the international community, in the face of facts revolving around satellites and other facts proven by clear evidence. China is still building large-scale concentration camps in East Turkestan. On September 24, the Australian Institute for Strategic Policy released a report stating that China was still building a new detention center in East Turkestan with re-education camps, detention centers, and prisons in East Turkestan since 2017 using satellite imagery, Google Maps, and other tools. It was found that there are more than 380 detainees. And out of these 380 prisons, 50% are high-security facilities, and experts believe that this means that the local government is gradually stopping the use of relatively low-level re-education camps and converting into maximum security prisons. By analyzing the detention system in East Turkestan, the 380 detention facilities detected by the satellites were divided into 4 levels according to different security levels. The facilities of the first-class detention facility are low security and are usually old school buildings surrounded by fences and walls only. These detention facilities were once places where the Chinese journalists were allowed to visit under the guise of the Chinese. Class 3 and Class 4 detention facilities are cells used to hold detainees, complete with concentrate walls, barbed wire, and guard towers. According to a study by the Australian Institute for Strategic Policy, most of the 14 construction sites in East Turkestan in 2020 are prisons, and half of the currently 61 facilities under construction are high-security detention camps. China is sending hundreds of thousands of Tibetans to forced training camps in the name of lifting them out of poverty. Adrian Zenz, the German researcher who exposed the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of Uyghurs in East Turkestan, released a report on China's latest investigation data on Tibetans on September 22, revealing that Tibetans are just as persecuted as Uyghurs in East Turkestan. According to the report, the Chinese Communist Party sent Tibetan farmers to a training center under a tightly controlled military regime to train them for cheap labor, and in the first 7 months of 2020, China will provide more than 500,000 rural workers in the name of poverty alleviation and Tibet aid. With the acceptance of authority, which represents about 15% of the local population, the program of labor settlement was started in 2005, when Tibet developed a program for farmers. In the first 7 months of 2020, more than 540,000 rural workers will join the program, completing 90.5% of targeted annual plan by July, which aims in the long term to transfer 49,900 people to autonomous Tibet and another 3,000 to China. The Chinese government's involvement in the daily life of Tibetans has been the subject of much speculations about the arrest of a Tibet man named Bayamagi Amwang on September 21, an American citizen and a spy for the Chinese government in New York. The President Donald Trump openly condemns China at the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. On September 22, the debate began at the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. In his speech, the US President Trump criticized China for spreading the virus all over the world, which has claimed countless lives in 188 countries, claiming that the World Health Organization is under control of China and that the United Nations is responsible for China's irresponsible behavior for the first time. Falsely claiming that there was no evidence of recurrence for the disease, he later said that people who did not catch the disease would not spread it, and that the United Nations should hold China accountable for its actions. In addition, China throws millions of tons of plastics and garbage into the sea every year, which leads to overfishing on the lands of other countries, which leads to the destruction of coral reefs on a large scale and the release of a toxic mercury into the atmosphere, many times more than other countries do. And if the United Nations is to be an effective organization, it must address the real issues in the world, as terrorism, violence against women, forced labor, drug trafficking, human and sex trafficking, and religious persecution. He said that attention should be paid to issues such as ethnic cleansing. Donald Trump cited China around 12 times in nearly 8 minutes of his speech in the United Nations, and also accused China of sacrificing its rapid economic development at the expense of the human environment.